everybody. So today we're going to go over how to remove distractions in the background of your images with Lightroom and especially more intensively in Photoshop. So here's a picture of my grandpa that I thought would be a good demonstration. So I'm going to do a couple little things real quick here. I'm going to lower the exposure slightly. Great. So the first thing I see is I want all the focus to be on him, but we've got this weird picture, looks like it's growing out of his head, and then if I don't want this in there and this in there and that in there, I can easily get rid of these things using the spot tool within Lightroom. I can just click and drag or select. And again, this little thing that pops up, you can actually move it to where you want it to select from. And sometimes it will pick somewhere really random and then you're able to move it over. If you don't have the double thing here, then you want to click on Tool Overlay to Always, and that will give you that option, which I suggest. Let's see, I don't want this like plugin, so I'm just going to click and drag there. And this might be a little bit more tricky. Let's just zoom into that, spacebar and click to zoom in. And we'll see how smart Lightroom is with getting rid of this guy. See, it's sampled over here, but we still want the windowsill, so we'll just kind of bring that a little bit this way to help line up those lines. And to me, that's pretty good. And if I wanted to, I can even get rid of this little stick thing here, like so. Great, so that did a pretty decent job already. But these guys here, I know that I will not be able to, I might be able to get rid of like little things like that, but I'm not going to be able to get as tight in to get rid of this. Because if I select it out there and do a quick drag, oh, hold on, then it kind of eats into his head a little bit and you kind of lose some of that stuff. So that's about as far as I can get in terms of the distraction removal within Lightroom. Now I'm ready to take it into Photoshop and take it to the next level. So going down to this image, right-clicking, Edit in Photoshop. And at this point, your Lightroom might ask you if you would like to apply your Lightroom adjustments, in which case you say yes. And mine is set to default for that because I most definitely want to take the work from Lightroom and then additionally work on it here. So the first thing I'm going to do is zoom into the spot. And how I'm zooming in here is clicking Command, holding down the Command or Control if you're on Windows, and the plus key by the delete button on your keyboard to zoom in and out. And why don't we start with this, because I actually don't mind that one. It's this one that's kind of weird to me. So again, in Photoshop, on here, on the left, we have all of the tools for what you can use. Up here is what you want to adjust for that tool, and then to the right-hand side, we have a layers palette, so where we can kind of like paint in and out depending on where we want that to go. So we'll start at the beginning here. First, I'm going to create a new layer, because I don't want to be working on the main layer all the time. So you can either drag that down to the new, and it creates a copy of that layer, or you can just click Command J. And I absolutely love keyboard shortcuts because they save a ton of time. So I can click B for brush, minimize that brush with the, what are those things called again? Those weird looking brackets underneath the delete button on your keyboard is going to make that brush bigger and smaller, which is going to save you a lot of time. Okay, so I just got my brush ready for later, and really what we're going to be focusing on is this upper half of the toolkit. And to be honest, you're not going to use that much of what's down here for your whole Photoshop work. So instead, what we're going to do is focus on up here. So this magnetic lasso is amazing. You also have the regular lasso and the polygonal. So I'm going to click the lasso, and I'll show you what that looks like. Then before I go down here, I'm going to double check my settings at the top of this tool here. So adding a feather is going to make the edge of my selection a little bit soft, kind of like the edge of a feather. And for something like this, because his hair is soft here, I do want a little bit of a feather. So I'm going to go 2 pixels and press Enter, and that will apply that. And then this is really important as well. So this is every time you make a selection, it's going to be a new selection, unless you hold down the additive. And then every time you select it, kind of adds to that selection. Command D will deselect what you've selected. So the lasso tool, basically it will allow you to freehand draw around what you'd like to select. So that's one way to do it if you're comfortable freehanding. This is especially helpful if you have a tablet. It gives you a lot of focus on that. You can also do the polygonal lasso tool, and this is kind of more better for like architecture and like straight edge objects, because you can get right around those objects. And let's say you place a node, you don't like where you went, just click delete, and as you can see, you can kind of backtrack. So if you make a mistake on your selection, you don't have to start from the beginning. So that's excellent for like kind of straight edge objects. And then the magnetic lasso tool is really impressive, and I'll give you an example of it over here. If we were to select this, all I have to do is drag it near the object that I want to select around, and it actually does a pretty decent job. But it only works if there's a lot of contrast happening, like different colors, different edges, things like that. And again, you can click delete to minus all those little nodes that you put there. I don't know if the magnetic lasso tool will be the best tool for this. Maybe it's okay. Only because in this area up here, you've got like light on light and not a lot of edges happening, but it actually did a pretty decent job there. So that's a little tour on the lasso tool for selections. There's other ways to select things as well. I love the lasso. It's one of my favorite ways to select things. It all depends on what you're selecting. And there's a million ways to do one thing in Photoshop, but there's always a more efficient way. So for example, if we were selecting the background here, we might use this magic wand. And all you have to do is click on a color, and it selects everything of that color. Let's say we only want to select this corner of the wall of the ceiling here. Maybe we're renovating our house and we want to see what color paint would look like on there, so we want to take a picture and isolate just this. You can see with the magnetic lasso, it's kind of getting confused over here because the colors are too similar. So something you can do with that is to change the tolerance. And I believe the lower the tolerance, the more discerning it will be with its selections. So as you can see, I lowered the tolerance to 1, and it's basically picking up like the variation of color within these pixels that look very similar to us, but it knows better. So I'll take it up to 4, because we know that 5 was too much, because that's what we started with. Oh, that's still too much. So let's try 3. Oh, that's a really tricky spot. Well, let's see who decided on. Let's say we decided on this yellow thing. Oh, there's a lot of yellow apparently. This isn't the best photo to use for the magic wand, but if the whole background was a green forest and it was all very blurry, then we could click on that and it would select it really well. If I wanted to select the ceiling, it'd be better to use the polygonal lasso, because then I could just go like this, and then boom, we have a perfect selection on the ceiling there. So as you can see, different tools kind of matter for different things. So let's zoom in. And you don't technically have to use a selection to get rid of this in the background, but it does help, and you'll see in a moment why that is. So for this one, I'm actually just going to freehand it, just with the most accuracy. I have my feather at 2 pixels, and I have it on additive selection. I'm going to use my tablet so that I can freehand with a little bit more precision. And I'm just going to draw around his head here, like so. So I'm going to make one selection here because I want to keep his ear. Great. And then I'll make one down here. And I know the first one is going to disappear because I have it set to additive. If you want, you can zoom in a little closer as well, just to double check. That's looking good. Nice. I really like that. And maybe I want to do a little bit down there. And maybe a little bit up here. Cool. So by making this kind of precision mask beforehand, it's going to make getting rid of the distraction a lot easier. Now we've got our selection, we're actually going to move on to eliminating the distraction. And there's different tools we can use to do that. The first tool is the heal tool. That's where you will sample an area. So I click the heal tool, and it's already got those that brush size that we selected before instead of a really big one. Now the heal tool works by holding down the Alt key, selecting what you'd like to sample from, and then clicking over that. You can see it kind of has a little sample. And you can also tell with your naked eye that that'll also have a little bit of a feather to it. So it's not going to be like a hard stamp. It definitely like kind of blends in a little. And that's the thing with the heal, is that what it does is it samples around the area, and it will kind of use artificial intelligence to decide how best to blend the two areas together. So it works great up here, but you can see when I'm down here, it kind of drew some from that little feather that we have on our selection. So it might not be the best tool to use for this. Instead, I'm going to go down to my stamp tool, which is not a heel. So what you see is what you get, basically. So if I click on this color over here and drag it there, you can see it does a much better job. And the stamp tool works great for an environment like this because this is solid color to a solid color. If you were blending like trees in the background, something like this, then you probably want to keep with the clone tool a little bit, depending on what your subject looks like. So we'll refine this in a moment. I just want to take this down here. Oh, you can also see that I'm actually now sampling up here now, because wherever I select is going to keep going. So if I select higher, when I go down, it will do that a little bit better. Great. So I'm happy with that for now, and I'm going to go Command D to make my deselection so I can fix it a little bit. So you can see I have like some feather remnants here from my selection not being super accurate, and then down here as well. So to eliminate that, same kind of deal. I can continue to use the stamp tool because this is very easy with these backgrounds like that. I can get tight twos here. So you see this line that forms? So that's called a halo. We don't really want the halo because it kind of gives away the fact that there used to be something else there. So instead, I'm just sampling by clicking Alt with my stamp tool and then just kind of drawing around that. So if you don't want to do selection at first, you don't have to. This photo is like really easy to just freehand it with the stamp tool, so we didn't really need to do selection, but it's good to get in the practice of that because it is very helpful in other cases. So I'm just selecting and painting, and now that background is gone. A little bit up here on his head, and then you can see kind of a dark spot here. So for that, I love the patch tool. Now the patch tool is very similar to the heal tool. What you do is you select the area that you don't want and you drag it to an area that you want to look like. Just like the heal tool, it takes all the information from the surrounding pixels and applies it as a blur motion so that it completely disappears, which is great. I love the patch tool because it gives me tons of control and it looks really nice. Great, so now Grandpa does not have that thing behind him, and you can go back to your layers here because we made sure that we were working on our new layer, and you can toggle back and forth to see how much better that looks in my opinion. So let's go to this, and let's say we want to get rid of these like little out of focus bears in the background. We're still going to make sure we're working on our layer here that we've done all our work on. And there's a variety of different things we can do here. It gets a little more complicated because we've got a pattern. So with the patch tool, we can actually just circle all the way around and then click and drag and line it up with something like that. That did a pretty good job, and you can clean out these areas. So there's no really right or wrong way to do it. You could use a variety of these tools to take care of anything. You don't have to do selections. So as an example, that was with the patch tool there. Did a great job. But let's say we wanted to try something else. I just went back in time there. And let's say we want to do the stamp tool. S for stamp, or you can click on this. I make my stamp really big. And with stamp, I alt-click where I want to sample from, just like the heal tool. And then I drag over. And I can just paint it over. But see how it begins to copy what used to be there. So you don't want to go too far with that. You want to sample as far over as you can so that you have all that room. You can always resample as well, but if you want to keep it consistent, it's nice to have it like that. See, then we got that kind of ghost, so I'm going to go on that side. Cool. Click and sample. So that's a way to do it with the stamp tool. And then if you want to see something really cool, which doesn't always work, is let's take our selection, our lasso, and here we're just making a selection. And if you want to really try to cheat, you can fill that selection with what is called content aware. So how I did that, I made my selection of what I want to disappear, and then I went to edit, content, fill, and then fill the contents with content aware at 100%. And usually it does a pretty good job of just assuming what you don't want to keep and what you do want to keep. And that's epic. It doesn't always work, as you can imagine, but right, and now we got a really great image. Just for fun, I'm going to turn that copy off and go down to this copy and just see what content aware fill actually does behind my grandpa's head here. And I don't think it's going to do a good job, but you never know. So make sure that's on additive. I'm still using my lasso tool to make my selection. Now we're going to fill it in just for fun, see what happens. It remembers my last settings, so I can just go OK. Yeah, so you can see it gets a little bit confused in the same way that Lightroom gets confused with its auto clone because it's drawing from too many different areas. So that's okay. We'll turn this back on. Yes. Also, if you find that you're in a tool that you don't want to be in anymore and you forgot that you're in that tool, just click the letter V and that will take you right back to just the Move tool. And that will allow you to select whatever you want without anything else being adjusted. Nice. So I'm going to save that and I'm going to keep these layers open with my save because if I need to change anything, I can go back and do that. Now, once it saves, it makes Lightroom has automatically made a copy. It's renamed it to edit the image number -edit.tiff. So it saves it to a TIFF file, which is a very large compressed image. It's like a JPEG, but with more information. And right next to it, it has the before image. So you can see before and after. It's a bit nicer, and it didn't even take that long. So let's go to this image here that Kristen sent in. She's been working on this to eliminate, I'm assuming, this background back here. So the first thing I see is these things on the ground, which I can easily take care of in Lightroom with my Heal tool. So I'm going to go up here, drag to that, and kind of paint this, and I can make my brush even bigger if I want to make that simpler. Nice. So take care of that. Excellent. And then we can maybe even get away with taking care of this because it's surrounded by kind of a lighter area. So that's pretty good. Cool. Yeah, that's not bad. This one is a little bit closer though, and I have like a weird hotspot there now. So I'm just going to delete that one by clicking on the edit and then pressing the delete button. Nice, and I'm going to zoom in and see if there's anything going on there. So this is a really cute photo. A couple adjustments here, just for fun. Raising my shadows to kind of show off more of that brick pattern. And their skin's a little bit red, so I'm just going to like make it green slightly. Just minor retouching. All right, and then take it to Photoshop now. Edit into Photoshop. Ooh, now it asks me. Edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments is what you want. Nice. So let's focus on back here. I think the patch tool will do a really good job here, so I'm going to click J. And honestly, the patch tool is my main go-to for most distractions that I need to get rid of, unless they're very intricate, in which case I might make a selection and use the stamp tool. So I'm just going to select what I don't want, move it to where I do want to do it, and continue to do that with these distractions here. Maybe I want to get rid of that distraction. Nice, so that's pretty good. And then this is kind of green and distracting for me, so now I'm going to switch to the stamp tool by clicking S, sampling where I want to sample from, and then I'm kind of painting that in like that. And you can see how I got that hard edge there now. So I'm going to lower my hardness. So what I did to get there is I just right-clicked onto my screen with my pen or your mouse, but you can also do those settings up here. Taking my hardness all the way down, and I'm going to try that again. You can see that the edge is a little bit softer. But if it still isn't soft enough, I can switch back to my patch tool, J, and then select it like this. Now, if J does not get you to the patch tool, that might mean that you might have a different clone tool selected at that time. So you might have to go over here and select the tool that you want, because J is like for most clone tools. And I notice that this down here, I don't want that. Don't want that, don't want that. Cool, so that's fine. Great. Now let's say we want to do something a little more complicated, just for fun. I mean, that's not necessary for this assignment whatsoever, but let's say we liked this photo quite a bit. But our favorite thing about this photo of my grandpa is like this whole character piece here. But we don't want any of this stuff in the background. We want to make it look like he's in the forest, in the wilderness. And we know that we're probably not going to be able to get away with just cloning the whole thing out in Lightroom. I mean, maybe you could try just kind of like brushing over the top of it and seeing what happens, just for fun. So it's taking a weird sample, and even if we move the sample around, it's not going to do the best job. So we're just going to reset that, and we'll take it right into Photoshop. Sometimes that's exactly where we need to go initially. Great. So a couple things we can do here. First, we're going to make a new layer with this information. So we're going to go Command J, which will automatically make us a new layer. Make sure that you're on this layer. If you can see how these little borders appear at the layer that you're on. And the first thing we're going to do, just for fun, L for lasso, we're going to make a selection. The feather's at 2 pixels. I'm going to keep that feather. And I'm just going to select around the objects that I don't want anymore. I'm not going to get too close to the gloves just yet. I'm going to do this in stages. Let's have a look at what content aware fill is going to do for us here. Because I'm always curious, because sometimes it's very surprising. It's taking a while. Okay, so not exactly, we didn't really want like 3 extra butts happening, but this is what we have to work with, and it's actually a decent job down here. So I'm actually going to just deselect, and I'm going to work with this, believe it or not. So now what we can do is a variety of things. We can use the patch tool, J, or click in this little patch here, and we can select what we don't want, drag it to what we do want, and in which case we just want to get some more bushes happening. And you can see it still kind of samples some of that texture. So we got rid of the first butt with the patch tool, and we can do that for the rest of this, but just to show you the variety of options that you have, we're going to click S for stamp tool, and I'm going to make sure I'm on lowest hardness. And you have to select a source first, so I'm going to go to Alt and sample up here. I held down Alt, and now I have an area, and you can see that anything I paint is going to transfer, including the extra butts because of the way it's going. So I'm going to continue to resample as I go along so that I don't have to worry about how far I'm dragging down. Cool, so got rid of that one with the stamp tool. And I think those two are the best tools to use for this job because they just clean it up so well, so easily. So I'm just going to continue to stamp here. Maybe I'll do the J, I'll swap back and forth as I go along, depending on what area I'm in. So I'm going to continue to select the areas that I don't want and drag into where I do want. And then as you can see, some things get repeated, right, because you're literally stamping and you don't want it to be too obvious. So just kind of like mess up all these little things that tend to repeat itself. Great. So that's pretty good. And this is like a messy, rough idea here, and if you want to switch it up, you can kind of drag that area over there, make it look like there's a natural difference in greenery going on. So where it gets tricky is in this area, in the gloves here. So we're going to zoom in, and because there's a harsh line here, I feel like my selection will be really good if I use the magnetic lasso at 0 pixels. And I'm just going to follow, I just clicked once and I'm just slowly hovering, and if it doesn't quite grab, I can actually click and manually place a node, so that's really helpful. It's doing a pretty good job. See how it's kind of getting confused here? It's jumping way over there. So I'm just going to delete those nodes, and I'm going to manually click a few in here so that it actually falls right down into the crease. Great, and I want to keep this matte, so I'm just going to go down this way. Nice. And then over here, it doesn't matter, you can just manually select where you want, and it's kind of dark down here, so I'll just go now. Great, so now we've got this really beautiful selection right in here. And now we can use a variety of tools to eliminate that. So let's go with the stamp tool. So I'm going to click S for stamp and select something that makes sense to go over there. So I'll select this area here. You can see that wherever I go, it's just going to stamp it right in there. Cool, and then this area is going to be a little, I got to select right in there so make it kind of blend a bit better. And then you can even select inside the selection if you like what's already happened there. Great, now I'm going to go undo, and you can see I've got like a bit of a line here, and I can blur that afterwards with my patch tool. I can just select that, and it gets really easy because the texture is all very similar now. Nice. So now it looks like he's just in the wilderness, everything's awesome. There's a few more distractions that I want to get rid of, like this mat on the floor below where the trailer used to be. And then now this little piece seems out of focus, so what's cool about that is because it's so obvious, I can go to my spot healing brush tool, which is basically the clone. It's exactly the same in Lightroom, so you just click and drag on the object that you want to eliminate, and then it should get rid of it pretty well. Didn't quite work on the jeans here though, so I'm going to go back to my stamp tool and just like restamp that area. I can continue on like that if I want. Nice. See, now I've got this right thing, and there's a piece up there, so I can use my stamp tool to just stamp in there. Nice. Let's look at the before and after. Before, lots of distractions. After, now it's just all about him. And I would probably do some more work in here to make it look less obvious and add like a lens flare and stuff, but this is good for now. Cool, so I hope you guys learned something. I purposely used a variety of different tools when I would probably only stick to 1 or 2 tools just to show you what's possible. So most images you probably only need to do a couple tools, and you might not even need to do any selections at all, but it's really great to know the options for sure. Thanks, guys.